All right, today we are doing the absolute value function. And if you remember from chapter 1, this is what an absolute value function looks like. It looks like a big V. We learned it as y equals the absolute value of x. And we're just going to put on our big boy pants and change y to f of x, or our big girl pants. And instead, we're going to use function notation. So here's what my graph looks like, and we know that if we put 0 in, we get 0 back. If we put a 1 into absolute value, it returns positive 1. If we put a 2 in, it returns positive 2. And in negatives, if we put negatives in, they always return positive answers. So this word right here, parent graph, I use that a lot. This is mama. And we're going to study mama and her babies today. So what does that mean? Let's look. Okay, here's the first baby graph that we're going to look at. This green one right here. This is the function where we take our x, we add a constant of 2 to it, and then we take the absolute value. So if I were to graph all these points, -5, 3 would be over there. -4, 2. -3, 1. Whoops. Let's do this again. -5, 3 is right there. And -4, 2, and there I was off by 1. And then -2, 0. And then -1, 1. And then 0, 2. And then 1, 3. And then 2, 4. And then 3, 5. And then 4, 6. And then 5, 7. If you see what happens here is we get an absolute value graph. Except it's not, it looks just like mama, except it's in a different spot. So we call that a baby graph. It looks just like mama, except it's a little different. Mama is always through 0, 0. All right, so the next one, the next baby we're going to look at is this blue one right here. This is the function where we take the absolute value first and then add 2. And if we were to graph this, we'd get -5, 7, -4, 6, -3, 5. Let's do -2, 4. Come on, you can come over there. -1, 3. 0, 2. I think you're starting to get the hang of it. 1, 3. 2, 4. 3, 5. 4, 6. It's a absolute value graph yet again, but this time it's moved a different way. And that's what I was trying to teach you about shifts. So remember, inside parentheses, we shift along the x-axis, but in the opposite direction. All right, so if we come back here and we look at these graphs, we can see that that's what's happening. Come on. There we go. My program was I'm going to take this, I'm going to clone it, and I'm going to turn it into the color green. Now, If I look at my green graph up here, notice that it's inside the parentheses. So that means we're going to shift along the x-axis, but in the opposite direction. So I'm going to start on top of mama, and they want me to shift every point 2 spaces, but I'm not going to go +2, I'm going to move over -2. So I'm going to take this right here, and I'm going to go 1, 2, and look at that. I fall right on the green dots from this table. And with the absolute value here, for the next one, let's make that into blue. And that is a shift, but it's outside the parentheses. So outside the parentheses, we shift along the y-axis, but in the same direction. All right, so that means I'm going to start on top of mama, right here, and it tells me to go 2 spaces. I'm not in the parentheses, so I'm going to go 2 spaces along the y-axis. So I'm going to move up 2, 1, 2. And that's how you do shifts. You just take the entire graph and shift it. All right, so let's try the new graphs, but not without doing tables. Let's just do them by shifting. All right, so let's erase all this. Okay, let's get rid of this blue one, and this green one, and all these points. Okay, so for this graph right here, first thing I see is that it's inside the parentheses. So it's inside, and that means it's going to be along the x-axis, and I'm going to do the opposite. So -5. So I'm going to do +5. Okay, so here I am. I'm going to clone that thing, and let's make it brown. And it says -5, so that means I'm going to start here, and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's what that graph looks like. Okay, for the next one, it tells me that I have shift of +4, but since it's outside the parentheses, outside means I go along the y-axis. So I'm going to take this, and let's make it black. And now I'm going to go up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's what the new graph is going to look like. All right, so on this one right here, if I plotted all these points for this green one, let's see what happens. So let's do it in green. -5, -5, -4, -3, -2, -1, here, 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 here. So this is what my green one is going to look like. We're going here and there. Let's make that green so it sticks out. Let's make that one green. Okay, so that's what it looks like. Now notice there's no shifting going on here. I'm not adding or subtracting or doing anything like that. In fact, I'm multiplying by a negative. And if you remember from geometry, when you negate a y value, you flip over the x-axis. And that's what this graph exactly did. It flipped over the x-axis. So hopefully you know when you negate an x value, you flip over the y-axis. And that's what's going on right here in this blue graph. You see how I negated the x value? And when I negate the x value, everybody flips over the y-axis. So that means this red line right here flips over and becomes this one. And this red line right here flips over and becomes this one. So this blue and green baby graphs look just like mama, except in different places. All right, last page. Right here, what we're doing is we're doubling and we're tripling. But you kind of got the idea of what's going to go on right now. So right here, this is telling me to double after I take the absolute value. Well, I can always do a chart, and I always have my handy-dandy calculator to do this for me. So if I were to do this graph real quickly and plot these points, this is what it would look like. Now, this is called a stretch. And we're not really going to get into this in Algebra 2. This is an pre-calculus kind of thing. But you can see when you're doubling it, it stretches it and makes it taller. I just thought I'd show you this, because you guys can still do this on your calculator. With this one, what I would like you to notice is that there is a negation of an x value. So I want you to realize that this is going to definitely get flipped over the y-axis, because when you negate the x value, you get flipped over the y-axis. And it's also going to be a stretch because you're tripling the values. So -5 would be all the way up here at 15, and -4 would be up here at 12. -3 we can kind of squeeze on here at 9, -2 at 6, -1 at 3, 0, 0, 3, 2. So you see what happens here? This thing got stretched even taller because we were multiplying by 3, and then the graphs got flipped over the y-axis. All right, so I'm really worried about you understanding what shifts are about along the x and the y axis. Those are the big things for this section. All right, see you tomorrow.